Hello, Toonami! What a brilliant day to be talking about our beloved Newcastle United, the best team in the world. Hope you're all doing well and ready for some exciting transfer talk. Now then, I've got two massive stories to discuss with you today that could shape our summer window. First up, what do you think about us potentially smashing our transfer record to bring João Pedro to St. James Park? The lad's been on our radar for years, and Brighton might finally be ready to do business. And secondly, how would you feel if we had some lingering doubts about Pedro Guehi, despite chasing him for 3 transfer windows? There's apparently one thing he's missing that's got our scouts scratching their heads. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm dying to hear what the Geordie faithful think about these developments. Right then, let's dive straight into what could be the signing of the summer for Newcastle United. João Pedro, that silky Brazilian forward, who's been lighting up the Premier League with Brighton, might actually be available this summer. And we all know how much Eddie Howe fancies him! It's mad to think we've been tracking this lad since 2022, when he was still tearing it up at Watford. Back then, we couldn't get the deal done, and Brighton swooped in to snatch him up the following year. Fair play to them, they spotted the talent, but now it's looking like we might finally get our chance to bring him home to Tyneside. What's fascinating about this whole situation is Brighton's approach to player development and sales. According to The Athletic, the Seagulls have built their entire recruitment model around the idea of selling their star players when the time is right. It's not that they're desperate to cash in on Pedro, but they've got this philosophy of never standing in a player's way if the right opportunity comes along. That's actually quite refreshing in modern football, isn't it? No holding players hostage or forcing them to stay against their will. The key detail here that's got me buzzing is that Pedro himself has apparently requested first-team football guarantees if he's going to make the move to Newcastle. Now that tells me 2 things. First, the lad is serious about his development and wants to be playing week in, week out. Second, and this is the exciting bit, he's clearly interested in what we've got to offer at St. James's Park. Think about it from Pedro's perspective. He's 23 years old, he's proven himself in the Premier League, and he's looking at Newcastle United, a club with massive ambition, incredible fans, and a manager in Eddie Howe who's shown he can develop young talents into world-class players. Look what he's done with the likes of Anthony Gordon and Alexander Isak. Pedro must be thinking, this could be the perfect next step in his career. The price tag being mentioned is around $70 million, which would absolutely smash our current transfer record. Isak cost us $63 million back in 2022, and he's been worth every penny, hasn't he? If we're talking about breaking that record for Pedro, it shows just how highly the club rates him. Eddie Howe has already confirmed we could break our transfer record this summer, which is music to my ears after a couple of windows where we've been a bit restricted. What I love about Pedro as a player is his versatility. He can play across the front line. He's got that Brazilian flair and creativity, but he's also adapted brilliantly to the physical demands of English football. At Brighton, he's shown he can score goals, create chances for teammates, and work hard defensively when needed. That's exactly the kind of player Eddie Howe loves. Someone who can contribute in multiple phases of the game. The timing feels right for this move too. We've established ourselves back in European competition. We've got the infrastructure and facilities to attract top talent. And the atmosphere at St. James's Park is absolutely electric week after week. Pedro would be walking into a dressing room full of quality players and a fan base that would absolutely adore him from day one. Brighton being described as tough negotiators doesn't worry me one bit. If anything, it shows they respect their players and won't let them go for cheap. That's fair enough. If we want quality, we've got to be prepared to pay for it. The fact that Pedro is among the most obvious candidates to attract interest this summer just proves what a special talent he is. Looking at our current squad, Pedro would add a different dimension to our attack. We've got pace and power with players like Gordon and Murphy. We've got the clinical finishing of Isak. But Pedro brings that bit of South American magic that could unlock stubborn defenses. Imagine him linking up with Bruno Guimaraes, two Brazilians who understand each other's game perfectly. The bottom line is this: if we can get João Pedro to St. James Park this summer, it would be a massive statement of intent. It would show the football world that Newcastle United means business, that we're not messing about when it comes to building a squad capable of competing at the highest level. Right then, let's talk about Pedro Guehi and this fascinating situation that's been brewing for 3 transfer windows now. It's mental to think we've been chasing this lad for so long, and yet there's still this little question mark hanging over whether he's the right fit for Newcastle United. For those keeping track at home, this is now the 3rd summer running where signing a centre-back has been our absolute priority. We wanted Guehi last summer. Paul Mitchell couldn't get a deal done with Crystal Palace. We didn't go back for him in January, instead trying to bring in Abdulkadir Kusanov from Lens. But Manchester City swooped in and nicked him from under our noses thanks to PSR restrictions. And now here we are again, summer 2025, still looking at the same position, still interested in the same player. What's interesting this time around is that Guehi is entering the final year of his Crystal Palace contract. That should work in our favour, shouldn't it? Last summer, Palace could demand whatever they wanted because they had him tied down. We were apparently willing to pay 70 million for him back then, which shows just how highly Eddie Howe and the recruitment team rate him. But this summer, with just 12 months left on his deal, you'd expect that price to come down significantly. Now here's where it gets really intriguing. According to Craig Hope from the Daily Mail, and he's usually pretty well connected with what's going on at the club, there are actually some doubts creeping in about whether Guehi is the right man for us. After all this time, after all this pursuit, our scouts and coaching staff are having second thoughts. That's quite something, isn't it? The specific concern that's been raised is about Guehi's aggression, or rather, his perceived lack of it. Hope mentioned that while everyone at the club acknowledges Guehi is a quality defender, there's this nagging feeling that he's missing that bit of aggression you need as a centre-back. Now that's a fascinating observation because it tells us a lot about what Eddie Howe is looking for in his defensive players. Think about the centre-backs we've had success with under Howe. Players like Fabian Schär and Dan Burn. They're not just technically sound, they're proper warriors who love a battle. They throw themselves into challenges. They're vocal leaders. They have that edge that can intimidate opposition forwards. It sounds like the coaching staff aren't entirely convinced Guehi has that same nastiness about him. But hang on a minute. Is that necessarily a bad thing? When you look at Guehi's statistics from this past season, he only committed 24 fouls in the entire Premier League campaign. That ranks him joint 130th in the league for fouls committed. Compare that to our own Bruno Guimaraes, who committed 65 fouls and was the most aggressive Newcastle player in that regard. Yet both players picked up exactly 7 yellow cards each. What does that tell us? Well, it suggests that Guehi is incredibly disciplined and composed. He's not flying into reckless challenges. He's not losing his head in crucial moments. And he's managing to defend effectively without picking up bookings. In an era where referees are stricter than ever and VAR is scrutinizing every decision, having a defender who can stay calm under pressure is absolutely crucial. Remember Guehi's performances for England at the European Championship. He was arguably, England's best player throughout that tournament, showing exactly the kind of composure and leadership you want from a centre-back on the biggest stage. Micah Richards was full of praise for him after the Serbia game, highlighting how calm and composed he looked. Despite it being his first major international tournament, that composure is exactly what we've been missing at times. How many games have we lost points in because of defensive lapses, moments where heads have dropped, or players have made rash decisions? Guehi represents the opposite of that. He's the kind of defender who stays level-headed when everyone around him is losing their minds. The question is whether Eddie Howe can develop that aggressive edge in Guehi's game. We've seen how the gaffer has improved virtually every player who's worked under him. Look at what he's done with Anthony Gordon's defensive work rate, or how he's helped Joelinton transform from a struggling striker into one of the Premier League's most effective box-to-box midfielders. If anyone can teach Guehi to add that nastiness to his game while keeping his composure, it's Eddie Howe. There's also the tactical aspect to consider. In Howe's system, we often play with a high line and aggressive pressing. Having a centre-back who can read the game well and make smart decisions about when to press and when to hold position could be more valuable than having someone who just throws themselves into every challenge. Guehi's intelligence and positional awareness might actually be exactly what we need. The price factor is crucial too. If Palace are willing to negotiate a reasonable fee because of his contract situation, it might be worth taking a punt on Guehi, even with these slight doubts. Sometimes the best signings are the ones where you see potential that others might miss. If we can get him for, say, 45 million, instead of the 70 million we were willing to pay last year, it becomes a much more attractive proposition. At 24 years old, Guehi still has his best years ahead of him. He's proven himself at international level, he's captained Crystal Palace, and he's shown he can handle the pressure of big occasions. Those are exactly the kind of qualities you want in a Newcastle United defender. The bottom line is this: while there might be some doubts about Guehi's aggression, his quality is undeniable. Sometimes the best signings are the ones where you back your coaching staff to develop the areas that need improvement, while building on the obvious strengths. If Eddie Howe believes he can turn Guehi into the complete package, then we should trust in that judgment. Well, that's all from St. James Park for today, lads and lasses. Two fascinating transfer stories that could define our summer window. Whether it's breaking the bank for Pedro's Brazilian magic, or taking a calculated risk on Guehi's potential, these are the kind of decisions that will shape our future. Keep supporting the best team in the world, and I'll be back with more updates soon. Away the lads!